What's up, everybody? Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. Mike, I don't even know what we're going to talk about tonight. We've had a couple changes happen. New things pop up and shows switched around.
I didn't know we were doing a show at all, so I'm wildly unprepared. Do you wanna do a show about like Chuck E. Cheese or the history of rubber bouncy balls?
Dude, I just watched a video about the history of Chuck E. Cheese, believe it or not.
Was it awesome?
It was.
Yes.
I'll take this.
I was hoping you'd say it was.
I'll take
and
this
don't
out.
you dare take it out. I want you to tell me in gory detail everything about it.
I found a YouTube channel called The Businessman. Chuck E. Cheese were like $1 billion in debt at one point.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just terrible. If you, I mean, Chuck E. Cheese is synonymous with video games and pizza. Like, if you fuck that combination up, you're an idiot. It's a money making fucking racket, and you goddamn know it. And if you're losing money on it, then you just suck at business.
They actually attributed a good part of it to, which I wasn't fucking aware of, some type of video game crash of the 80s, the late 80s. People stopped playing video games, which not in my fucking world.
So this, yeah, it wasn't for me either. But believe it or not, Nintendo almost didn't make the American market because of this video game crash. And a lot of the fingers, people that are pointing out what is responsible for the video game crash, point to the Atari game E.T. based on the movie, because it was such a shit game that it, like, people were like, fuck video games. So in the late 80s, and yeah, the late 80s, when Nintendo was trying to break into the American market, the only reason they got it on there was because they included the light gun, and I don't know if you remember this, but the early Nintendos that came out came with a little robot.
Yes, I do. I remember that.
It was being marketed as an interactive toy that would also play video games. And that's how they got into the American market, because video games were so shit.
Wow, I was not aware of that.
But I didn't know that affected the arcades. But I guess, I mean, really that makes sense, because where can even find an arcade anymore? You know, like, that's really weird to me too. You know, the arcades in the 80s used to be fucking everywhere. And then they slowly dwindled down to like your occasional pizza place or a mall. And then as the 90s went out, all the arcades were gone. Like, you can't even find a fucking arcade anymore.
Yeah, there's one in every single mall, and they just phased them out. Well, I mean, they started charging like $3 to play Mortal Kombat when they set it like on the hardest difficulty. They just started fucking robbing people.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Like, oh, the new Tekken came out. Sure did, but you got to pay $1 if you want to play it.
Yeah, for about 25 seconds.
That's why I always liked the remakes of Gauntlet, because they kept that at $0.25. And so you could just go and spend $5 and be there for a couple hours. It was awesome.
There was a place where I lived that was called Nickel City, and all games were nickel.
Oh my God, that sounds incredible.
It was.
I want to go back in time, man. We used to have so many cool places. We had this place called Sports Star 2000, and the name alone is fucking awesome. But you walk in, and as soon as you walk in, there's this huge fucking ride. It's like you know those rides at the fair that it's like a rocket ship on the end of like a long arm that connects to a center thing, and it goes around in a circle, and the rocket ship will go up and down as it spins in a circle. But it was one of those type of rides, except you controlled when it went up and down, and you could rotate the rocket ship to shoot the other rocket ships as you were spinning around, and if you hit one of them, their ship would dip down. So they had this ride that was a game, and then surrounding this was just banks of arcade games. And then they had like a fucking a virtual reality thing. They had a laser tag. It was the coolest place on earth. They had bowling alleys, and somehow it went out of business. What the fuck?
Dude, that reminds me, I'm sure listeners are loving this, but
all this, anybody who's old like we are is fucking eating this shit up. All you young sons of bitches, you just be patient. We'll get to the good stuff, but let the old men reminisce. Back in my day,
there was a place near me that was like you described. It was called the Great Entertainer. And it was basically like a Costco that was emptied out. But they only had one thing there, arcade games. And the whole fucking place. And the place was huge. And we'd go there and it got really fucking seedy. Like it was so big and so dark in some places. There was like people like smoking crack in there. There were hookers in there. I remember the last time I went there.
Hookers?
Yeah, I'm serious.
So you could go play some Donkey Kong and then get a handy afterwards if you're feeling saucy.
It was that big.
You're like, you know what? I didn't beat my own high score, but I'll go. I'll go see something. Sapphire over there, and we'll work something out. Hey, baby, I got a roll of quarters. What can you help me out with here?
Well, it just became a place where tweakers hung out, and then it was just literally so big and dark that you could do whatever the fuck you wanted in there. And the last time we went there, there was a shooting in there, and it's so big in there, it just sounded like firecrackers. My dad knew what it was. And he's like, "Whoa, we're leaving," and then they closed it down like the next day, permanently. Maybe that's what happened to most of the arcades in America.
Hookers and gunshots. That's what ruined arcades in America. I buy it.
Well, enough reminiscing. What are we talking about tonight?
Yeah. Oh man, you mean we're not going to talk about arcades of the 1980s anymore?
I hope nobody's sore about that, but there actually was a campaign for hashtag keep the bullshit in the shows, and it was voted unanimously to keep this.
And if you want to hear more talk about arcades, please join our Patreon, where we released an episode of a new show called The Quick and the Weird, and we talked all about the Polybius urban legend. So if you're into that sort of thing and you want to hear more random bullshit with a sprinkling of weirdness thrown in, then go pitch a few bucks over at Patreon. We'll certainly appreciate it, and maybe your ear holes will too. Ooh, ear holes, sexy. So I do have a topic for tonight. I was just joshing you guys. I have something here. It's cool. We're not going to give you a bullshit episode tonight. Well, we've got actual stuff to talk about. So we're all familiar with the big stone heads from Easter Island. I'm assuming that we all know about them, but there's this place called Easter Island, and there's big stone heads that are on Easter Island, and they're known as the Moai. But for a long time, we as in humans in general, or modern humans in general, not we as in Mateo and I, or you guys, we'll include you in the we as well. But for a long time, we thought that they were just heads. And it wasn't even until fairly recently, I think like as recent as 2015 or something, where we unearthed these statues and realized that all the statues that were on the island weren't just heads coming out of the hills. That was an actual body attached to it. And some of these bodies were, because they were buried, they were so well preserved that we were still able to see petroglyphs carved into them. And it was in this language that we didn't recognize, and we had no way to decipher it. So we can only speculate as to what these petroglyphs are or what the purpose of these heads are. But there's, with a lot of these ancient monuments and structures and sculptures that we have limited information on, they do kind of tend to have an air of mystery about them because we know so little about them, and it just seems so strange and so different from our what we know as modern humans and what we're familiar with. We can only speculate on what these might mean based on other things that we've speculated on and evidence that we found for similar things. And it's when you go far enough back, or when you have a remote enough culture, it's really hard to get a definitive ruling on what things mean, especially if it's a different language that's no longer existent and we're just going based off like similar languages. It's really hard. So, there's a lot of speculation involved. And, of course, because it's something old and mysterious and very different looking from what we would think of as humans, the Ancient Aliens crowd jumps on as well. And I'll get to the Ancient Alien stuff, but it's to be expected. But the statues, what we, and again, we being humans in general, or I guess in this case, I should probably not say we and say modern historians or mythologists or whatever, archaeologists. Anyway, what's the best guess for what these things represent are recreations of ancient ancestors who are being honored and maybe even deified or looked at as being godlike. And these statues are thought to have been sculpted in their likeness and then moved into position. And there's a lot of ideas as to who the culture was that actually built them. Even the dating on them is kind of up for dispute. The general consensus is that it was anywhere from 1250 to the 1500 current era. And these things were created by the Rapa Nui people. For people that don't know, Easter Island is an island, as the name would imply, in the southeastern Pacific Ocean. It's currently considered a special territory of Chile, but it's traditionally thought of as being most likely a offshoot of Polynesian culture. But it's found in the southeasternmost point of what's known as the Polynesian Triangle, which is nowhere near as scary as the Bermuda Triangle. It's probably a lovely place to visit. So please go hang out on the Polynesian Triangle. It'll be totally fine. The population on the island has varied, and the most recent population survey says that there's about 7,000 people that currently live on the island. When it was discovered by the Europeans in 1722, the population was thought to have only been between 2,000 and 3,000. But apparently at one point in the past, it had been a thriving culture. The reason they think that is because of the sheer amount of these heads that are left all over the island and the size of them. It's not something that a primitive culture would likely be able to do. So it's thought that the culture was pretty industrious, probably advanced for its time. Not to say that they were like future man or anything, but
right.
But based on what they're able to achieve, it's in the same way that like ancient Egypt was advanced for their time. But after the Europeans found it, just like happened in most places, their slave trading started opening up, and people from Peru started raiding the island for slaves in the 1860s. And by 1877, there were only 111 native inhabitants on the island.
Jeez.
Yeah. But these heads, a lot of them are positioned in ways that we can, it's obvious that they were put in this place But then there's others that are along these roadways that are just kind of, it looks like they were abandoned. And a lot of them are actually face down, like in the grass or the ground on the side of these roadways.
Whoa.
And it was originally thought that these roadways, and there's still some people that do think about or do think that the roadways were how these things were moved around, because the heads, not like Stonehenge or any of those where the stone was brought in from somewhere impossibly far away. Here it was actually quarried on the island from an old volcano. And they're thought that these roads were created because there's all these pathways all over the island. And it was thought that these were developed in order to move the heads. It was thought that they were just dragged along these roads. But in 1914, there was a researcher named Catherine Rutledge who proposed a theory that the roads were actually built for ceremonial purposes and that they weren't built for dragging these heads. And Thor Heyerdahl in the 1950s came up and he was, trying to dispute what she was saying, and was proposing that these roads were, in fact, built to move the heads. But in 2010, archaeologists actually discovered evidence to show that they were, in fact, built for ceremonial purposes. The way that they're built, they're in a concave manner. So if you think about it, it would make moving heavy stones along a road that's built like that, it would take a lot of work, a lot more work than it would take, if you were thinking like you'd make a road to make things easier, this would make things more difficult. So it wouldn't make sense that they would have built it for this purpose. So the new theory is proposing that these heads were actually built along these roadways. So the roadways were being used like for a religious procession, and these heads were all lined up on the side of the road, like kind of leading the way to the sacred site. And they think that over time what happened was that the pedestals or the platforms that these big I guess the full bodies were balanced on rotted away and crumbled, and so that's why they fell over. The weight just kind of took them down.
Huh. That's believable.
Yeah. And the roads all, and this could be another reason why it was also thought that the roads were used to move them, but all the roads point to that large extinct volcano that all these heads were carved from. But it's thought that because it's an ancient volcano, if the cultures that lived on the island, like the native cultures were there, they would have a memory that this volcano was active at one point. And in their mythology, it could have been seen as like a point of power on the island, or maybe even like the heart of the island. Because we know with volcanoes, especially in the South Pacific, volcanoes form a lot of the islands that are there. So it could definitely be seen as being like the heart of the island, because from that, the island literally flowed out.
Right, and made other islands.
Yeah. But the heads themselves, though, the thing about the heads is we don't know exactly how they were moved. We've got speculation on how they did it, but we don't exactly know how it's done. On the island, there's a total of 887 statues, and they were all moved around and put in these specific locations. We do see that there is evidence of stones that were left behind in the quarry that were carved. The ones that were left behind, their heads sloped in the opposite direction. So like when you look at them, that always looks like the head is sloping backwards.
Yes.
But the ones that were left behind had the head sloping forward. And it's a possibility that could have helped with movement making it more forward leaning so that when they were moving them, it helped to propel them forward. And then they would recarve it once they had it where they needed it.
Right. Just finish off the forehead when they get it to where they need it to be.
Yep. But some of these are so, like, the biggest one on the island is 33 feet high. So think about that. 33, this big fucking thing that's half head, 33 feet high. It weighs 82 tons.
Oh.
So just to give some perspective, the typical threshold for a current crane is 12 to 20 tons. That's the typical. The record is it's a crane from, I think it's called Kroll. I don't know, it's Danish, but it's got like, I think it's called Kroll cranes. But this particular crane was able to lift up to 120 tons. But that's the record. Okay, so typical cranes that we use in a modern setting for building or whatever, between 12 and 20 tons. This thing weighs 82 tons. So how was it moved?
Now, I've seen a video. I've always loved these statues, and it's I mean, I don't know about you. I looked into these things very early on when I was a kid. Wasn't it something that kind of just popped up with looking into mysteries and spooky stuff and unknown things?
Yeah, like I remember the old, again, going back, reminiscing of being a kid in the 80s. I remember seeing these commercials on TV for like Time Life books, and they had this series all about weird shit. And I remember always seeing on the commercial the Easter Island heads. So to me, like, I always associated those heads with like fucking aliens and ghosts, right, and weird shit like that.
I remember seeing the same commercial, but I remember when they discovered that there was a body below the heads that were in the dirt, and I almost didn't believe the photos. I for some reason thought it was bullshit or somebody altered it. But I remember seeing a special when I was younger about how they were trying to figure out how they moved them, and they did the old, a row of logs and laid it down and rolled it forward and grabbed the logs from the back and moved it to the front and just rolled it that way, which kind of didn't work with the dirt there and the terrain. But there, some years later, it wasn't recent. They had, I mean, it's got to be replicas of these huge statues that look the same, but they've got ropes tied around the head, and there's leads going to every corner, like every corner where this thing's positioned. And they moved it by rocking it back and forth and pulling it forward as they did so rather easily. So it was interesting to hear you say they left possibly parts of the foreheads on for maybe like a counterweight for moving it that way.
Yeah, that's one of the most likely theories, and I think they might be onto something with that. And we also talked about moving large rocks when we talked about Stonehenge one time. But there's a guy who he built his own Stonehenge in his backyard. It was scaled down a little bit, but he was able to move the rocks using this pivot method, where they would rock it, and then when they would get a corner lifted up, they would put a smaller rock underneath the corner and then rotate the big rock on this smaller rock. They would just use it as a pivot and move it that way. So I could absolutely see that being the way. I wonder though, like, what sort of damage that would do to the pedestals if the pedestal and the figure was all carved as one piece, and you're moving it that way, rocking it back and forth. You'd think there'd be a lot more. And maybe that's why there's so many of these statues laying on the side of the roads, because maybe the pedestals broke and they just fell down. They're like, well, what the fuck are we going to do? It's fucking 30 tons.
Right. Stress fractures from them moving it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's funny that you did bring up that you saw something about people actually doing it, because there were a couple of people that have actually done it now. In 1987, there was an archaeologist named Charles Love who was using a 10-ton replica of a head. And he, instead of rocking it, he actually just tied 2 sledges to it. And then him and 25 men moved the statue 150 feet in 2 minutes.
Whoa.
And then in the late 90s, there was another experiment that was carried out by Pavel and Thor Heyerdahl, again, is showing up. They were moving a statue that was 20 tons, and they, in one day's work, they moved it 330 feet.
Do we know how many men Thor had in his team of moving that one?
I actually don't know. I don't know how many men he used for his experiment. But one of the interesting things is that in the Rapa Nui folklore, the legend surrounding these things is that these statues literally walked by magic.
Yes.
And went into their place.
That's what I was hoping.
So are these things like golems? Were they ancient golems created by some magical Easter Islander? The mystical Rapa Nui witch doctor imbued them with the magic and gave them spirit, and they walked into place and sat down to defend the island.
Ooh, see, I like that better. Maybe not a golem. Maybe it was some type of spell to get them to animate and walk to their destination, and then put them in some type of dormant state for any magical threats. Because, I mean, there'd probably be tons of stories of them just walking around, and even if they lived peacefully, you know, you probably hear stories about, this village had a golem.
He was headbutted to death. He was headbutted to death by a 33-foot golem. Yeah, I love the idea that they just walked into the place like, well, you carved me, now I'm going. They just walk into place.
Right? How cool would that be? You just have to carve them a certain way with a certain tool for it to come alive, and it'll automatically go protect the island.
Yeah, I would love it. And that there's some of them that are actually buried in the slopes of the volcano itself.
Really?
Yeah. And we don't really know what a lot of them, like what the significance of a lot of them are. Because again, we think that it's maybe ancient ancestor worship or maybe depiction of the gods. But there's one story that says that kind of it's a legend of a group of people that may or may not have existed. But it's thought that maybe, it might be like a chicken or the egg sort of situation, but it's thought that maybe these heads were a representation of these people. So there's this legend of the Hanuipe and the Hanumamoko, and they're 2 separate people that lived on Easter Island, and at one point they came into they came into conflict with each other, and a battle occurred, and the Hanuipe people were completely destroyed. But whether or not these people actually existed, or whether or not the war actually took place, is up for debate. But the story is that the Hanuipe, the name may or may not have been mistranslated as long ears. And if you look at the statues have elongated earlobes.
Right.
And we know a lot of cultures in the past, and you know, the punks and hardcore kids all over the place now, stretch their earlobes and put plugs in or various ornamentation. So it was thought that the Hanuipe people would have the elongated earlobes, while the Hanumamoko people were thought, again, maybe mistranslated to mean short ears. But the story goes that the Hanuipe came to Easter Island, and they arrived on Easter Island before the Polynesians arrived. And they were like the natives of the island, we'll say. And then there were these later immigrants that came from Polynesia, who became the Hanumamoko. And they had lived together, and some stories say they lived together in harmony, and then something happened where they fell out of favor with each other. But the most popular story seems to be that the Hanuipe were like the elite class, and the Hanumamoko were the working class. And they came into conflict with each other. And one story tells that there was like a Romeo and Juliet sort of situation going on with this one couple. And one was the husband was one of the Hanuipe, and the wife was Hanumamoko. And the Hanuipe came up with this plan where they had this big ditch, and they filled it with all this wood, and they were going to force the Hanumamoko into this pit and set him on fire.
Ooh.
And the husband told his wife about it, and his wife, being a Hanumamoko, goes and tells her people. So they do a preemptive attack on the Hanuipe and push them into the pit and light them on fire. And there were two that escaped, but they escaped and went to live in a cave, but one of them was found and ended up being killed, leaving only one survivor of the Hanuipe. And this ditch actually exists, and it's known as, I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce it, but what it means is Hanuipe's oven.
Ooh.
And they found that there is a layer of ash in there that would date back to sometime between the 16 and 1700s.
Holy shit.
But they haven't found charcoal or bone fragments to prove that it was actually used as a place to burn bodies.
Mm-hmm.
What they think it may have been was actually a ditch that was used to hold a bunch of earth ovens or cooking pits. And it was close to where the quarry was. So, maybe it was like a food line for the workers.
I see.
Yeah. But the story of the battle is way cooler. Thor, this Thor guy, Thor Heyerdahl, he proposed that maybe the original people on the island were actually from South America. And they came from what's now Chile, or maybe Peru, and made their way to this island. And he speculates that they were pale with red hair.
Wow,
So the red hair thing comes up again.
Yes. I was just going to say that. There's a lot of similarities with, you brought up Ancient Aliens earlier. It's almost like the same type of story. There's like an inferior race that's probably put to do most of the work. And then, to hear the whole pale skin and red hair stuff.
Yeah. And so to further the whole like elite race thing with the long ears and short ears, and how I said it could have been a mistranslation. There's a similar word that would change the meaning completely from long ears and short ears to stocky people or slim people. So in this, either way you look at it, if you've got the ornamentations in your ears to show how fucking fancy you are, or if you're stocky, that would mean that you're well fed. So you're still the higher race, while the slim or skinny people are fucking starving and doing all the work.
Right.
So either way, it could, either way it's interpreted, it could be it could still end up with the same result, with one being superior over the other. But the question remains, though, how the fuck were they moved? If we were able to move, if Thor and his buddy were able to move a 20-ton statue 330 feet in one day, what would it take to move an 80-ton statue?
800 plus of them too.
Yeah. What you would need is aliens. That's what you need.
Yeah, I mean, after hearing all this, it kind of makes sense why they talked about it on Ancient Aliens and why that kind of is brought up when you talk about these things. They had to have some alien help, some type of, I mean, you got to think of like a tractor beam or something that causes something to levitate.
Yeah, they just had their UFO floating over. Because here's the thing. Aliens that come to Earth have nothing better to do than help us move heavy shit. That's what they're well known for doing. They're like, you know what? That looks fucking heavy. Let's move that, because we're apparently intergalactic moving teams, and that's what we do. We move heavy shit so people in the future be like, oh, it was fucking aliens.
Yeah. Show them how cool we are by moving that rock.
Yeah, we have these awesome spacecraft, but yeah, let's rather than share this cool technology, let's just move shit for people. You know, they're just the do-gooders of the universe. They just go play. You know, don't hurt your back, buddy. I got this. What would we have done without aliens to help us move heavy shit? Oh God, Ancient Aliens is so stupid. I love it, but I also want to punch it.
I recently put that on as like background noise while I was doing something. And
I routinely fall asleep to it.
Do you?
Yeah, I like if I'm really tired and I just want something on in the background, I'll always put on Ancient Aliens. And I typically, before I fall asleep, there'll be something that'll come on that'll make me chuckle. It's just so fucking last night I fell asleep to one about Satan. I didn't get to how they incorporated Satan and aliens yet. At that point, I didn't last too long in the episode, but right. I'm like, shit. Are they gonna say that the devil himself was an alien? Because I want to hear that story.
This would all make sense if Jesus Christ himself was an alien.
Well, I mean, we all know that he's otherworldly. It's always, everything is otherworldly. It's great.
I think it holds up. It's still, at least it's very intriguing. It's well done, and I chuckle more out of nostalgia now. I don't think I dislike it as much as, I don't know, maybe we lead on, but I think it's still good stuff. It's a good show to watch for people who are interested in that shit. But you definitely see the, ice cream. Is it made by extraterrestrial? I mean, they started to lose their shit.
It's not even that. To me, like, I remember really enjoying the original miniseries. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Okay. Like, just
it felt like you threw up. I was like, whoa.
Nope. Sneeze just snuck up on me. I remember really liking the original miniseries, and again, and I've talked about this a million times on the show, how my opinions on the topic have evolved since we've started the show. Because I started the show as like a firm believer in all of the stuff, and as we've gone on, I've become considerably more skeptical. But to me now, looking at the Ancient Alien thing, like not even the show, I mean, there's a fair amount of ridiculousness in the show itself, but just in the theory alone, is that it really diminishes human capabilities. To me, like putting all your eggs in the alien basket is just like, it's just like a easy answer to a mystery. To me, the mystery is much more intriguing that we don't know how the fuck these ancient monuments were even created. We don't know how, we speculate on the purpose of the pyramids, but it doesn't seem very likely that the pharaohs were buried in the pyramids, considering there's literally no markings. We've never found any bodies, and there's a place called the Valley of the Kings, where we found all sorts of tombs of dead pharaohs and no pyramids. So
right,
and we don't know how the fuck they were built. We still can't replicate it today. We cannot build a pyramid to this day that was built like the pyramids of ancient Egypt. Like, wrap your head around that. And we have no fucking clue. And the fact that Stonehenge, we don't know anything about that. Like, those are the fucking mysteries that really, like, if I think too much about it, it'll keep me up at night. Like, just what the fuck? And to say that it was aliens, again, just lifting heavy shit for us, it's fucking silly.
Yeah, I kind of noticed, and I've always found it interesting, this link to these structures like this, these impossible structures. They're mostly made of stone. Do you think there could be some type of elemental magic?
Oh my God, I want there to be elemental magic. Absolutely. I'm totally on board for that.
I remember Ancient Aliens even talking about Merlin and him having some stick that was able to move heavy stuff. And
no, it wasn't a stick. It was an alien device that the aliens bestowed upon Merlin, because Merlin is also probably an alien, or half alien maybe, or maybe he was an ancient abductee and they gave him his alien moving rod, and he's like, haha, I'm magic, and they're like, these fucking troglodytes think that he's magic, but really he's just using our moving stick.
It's a furniture tool.
Yeah, it's an alien furniture tool. It's like, it's
equivalent to a dolly.
Their version of a dolly. Yeah. Yep, exactly. Look at these assholes fawning over a dolly. It would be like us going back in time and laughing at people who think a lighter is amazing. Like, dude, I can get that for $1.50 at a gas station.
Elemental magic's a real thing, though, right? So, I mean, is that possible?
You flick your lighter and flames produced. I'm an elemental magician. There you go. I have this gun. When I pull the trigger, water squirts out. Elemental magic, you fools! I can control and harness all of the elements with my modern things. And I could go back in time and just blow everybody's mind. It's like batteries. Look at this. I can produce light. Oh my God. Stupid ancient people. What do they know anyway?
It's all time travelers. Time traveling aliens.
No, not aliens. People, damn it. They're time traveling people.
That's what I hope ultimately all that shit is. I hope when the aliens...
How cool would that be?
Yeah, when the aliens land, it's just going to be a dude with like shoulder length hair and go like, God damn, finally worked.
Yeah. Or we're going to, like, sometime they're going to catch the people that have been doing the cattle mutilation, and it's just going to be some fucking early 20s asshole from the future that's just going to, when he gets caught, he's just going to be like, oh, you got pranked, bro. Like, oh God, these assholes are still around in the year, whatever year you're from. Fuck.
Yeah,
they probably take over civilization. That's what happens.
All cattle mutilations are college prankers.
Well, what happens is civilization devolves to the point where it's just this huge prank war that's being broadcast across the galaxy. So everyone's just like trying to up the ante with the pranks, and you just have this one asshole, because he can do time traveling, he's been mutilating cattle for decades, but it's really just been like it's his monthly upload to YouTube. It's just him mutilating a new cow and not getting caught. And then his rival is doing all the crop circles. He's like, oh, these 20th century farmers are going to be so pissed. And then they have some like super high tech future device filming the farmer's reaction the next morning, and then they've got a video of them watching the video and laughing because they're such fucking pricks. God, I hate future those guys.
Yeah, future people have to be pricks.
Yeah, especially if they're coming back here. They're like the biggest dicks alive. But in typical Whatcast fashion, we went way off track. But
I'd say this is like a borderline Oparts episode, maybe.
Except better.
Better. Usable.
Yeah, because there's actual stuff in there. But so let's get back to the giant heads for a minute, if I could. There are these set of statues called, I think they're referred to as the seven stone giants, but they're 7 16-foot statues, each weighing 18 tons, that stand together in a group. And I believe they're looking out across the ocean. But it's thought that these were to symbolize the 7 explorers that was sent by King Hotumatu from Polynesia, who found Easter Island. But there's others believe that they might actually have been built as a monument to some ancient gods. And then still others think maybe they are chiefs or high-ranking members of societies. But the theory that they were the 7 gods of creation kind of has a certain ring to it. There's a lot of cultures that utilize the number 7 to represent sacred things, and even in Sefer Yetzirah, I'm very sorry for anyone who speaks Hebrew, because I probably butchered the fuck out of that, so my apologies. But it's the Jewish book of creation, but they name 7 different creators, and on each day is attributed to one of the 7 creators, and the creators also align with celestial bodies. So, for instance, one aligns with the planet Saturn, one with Jupiter, one with the Sun, one with Mars, one with Venus, and one with Mercury. But there's 7s all throughout sacred writing, even in ancient Egyptian writing, and even some stuff found from the ancient Druids in Britain. 7 seems to play an important part in the development of creation, but also symbolizes change. And these things they're seen to echo throughout various cultures around the world, which kind of makes me think that this is another piece of evidence that at one point there was a global culture in the world. And maybe are you familiar with the Tower of Babel story in the Bible?
Yes, sir.
It makes me think maybe something like that was actually reality at one point, where all of mankind actually did work together. We all viewed each other as one, rather than having the divisions. And then, as for anyone who's not familiar with the story of Babel, I believe it's in Genesis, but it's one of the stories told in Genesis after creation. But the people, as they began to populate across the world, they all spoke the same language, and they would work together to achieve many great things. And they started to build this massive tower going up into the sky. And God was worried that the tower would go so high that it would reach him in heaven. And in order for them not to reach him in heaven, and he was starting to feel threatened by them, and saw that with unity, that when mankind came together, that they would be capable of potentially overthrowing him. So rather than see this eventually happen, he split up mankind and gave them all different languages so that we could no longer communicate with each other and band together. And that created divisions among us. Mm-hmm. So when I hear things like the idea of the number 7 echoing, or when we see in South America, the statues where they show people with like European features and beards, and then they right next to a statue that would have the features of the natives of South America, next to another statue that has the features of native Africans.
Yeah, we've talked about those statues before, and people.
Yeah,
I highly suggest you guys go look at them because, one, the artistic portrayal of the different, ethnicities is very well done. They're beautiful. and they really demonstrate the different races of people. It's not just a different styled face of the same face. It really, really, really looks like people of all races. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and the fact that we see pyramids all over the world, and certain like stone circles. When I see similarities like that, or I don't know, there's just so many different types of things that seem to like the red hair, pale skin, how that always seems to show up.
Yeah, some type of shared history, shared knowledge, for sure.
Yeah, and they all have. There's so many stories of giants with the red hair and pale skin in places where people don't have red hair and pale skin. So that's kind of weird. And I don't know. It just, to me, that it seems like there's a lot more evidence that things are connected than that things aren't connected. And I think the mysteries on Easter Island, I think if we understood more about this global culture, that maybe it would help us decipher some of this. And I know like the period of time that we're dealing with is, like I said, they're said to have been built sometime between 1200 and 1500. And this isn't BC, it's the current era. So I don't know, man. There's just a lot of mystery there, and I don't think it was fucking aliens. I don't think that the galactic lifters came to help people move these things. I want to believe that they were magical walking statues that just got up and were like, we're gonna walk our asses to these places and just sit down and then become statues. I want that to be the reality, but I'm sure that's not the reality either. It's probably the pivot thing, and they're probably representations of ancient ancestors just kind of being revered as part of their spiritual practice. And I think that's really it. I think that they're, obviously they're amazing, and the mystery is still there. Like, what if they are actually older than we think they are?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of evidence for that all over the world, like with the pyramids and the Sphinx, and Göbekli Tepe, for instance, like this huge structure, and I know I bring this up a lot, so I'm sorry, but it's fucking 12,000 years old, and it predates anything in Mesopotamia, and it's fucking huge.
Yeah.
So it's not like there wasn't civilization before Mesopotamia like we had originally thought. And I think that we should revisit a lot of this stuff with that in mind, and maybe not cling to the ideas of the past as much, that we know this to be true because some asshole before us said it was true, and we will ignore any evidence to the contrary.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just doesn't make sense to me. There's so much out there to say that we're so much older as a species, or well, maybe not as a species, but as a civilized species. Just, I don't know.
You gotta wait for a magical attack like in Masters of the Universe or Hellboy to see if those things wake up and...
Yeah. Oh, God, please. Somebody send a magical creature to Easter Island and somehow attach like a GoPro camera that's monster sized to its face. And I want to see it go and fight an army of Moai.
Yeah, what if like some giant...
I want to see that big fucker wake up. The big 33-foot fucker. He's going to wake up and punch it right in the dick.
What if some giant sea creature was known to come out of the water near the island and attack, so they made these magical rock beings to protect the area?
It just bitch slaps the Kraken.
Yeah.
Fucking Zeus. Release the Kraken. And it goes and it tries to attack the island, and the Moai just rise up and punch it in the eye.
Comes back crying.
And the Kraken's like, fuck, I can't see. Can't see.
Why'd you send me down there, bro?
Yeah, that was mean. Yeah. So don't release the Kraken near Easter Island is the bottom line, I guess.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.